It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you folks, or to bring back to the stage for our lunchtime talk on the Cyber Center for Education, Innovation, and the National Cryptologic Museum, to bring back General Isler, and he will also be accompanied by Mr. Larry Castro to provide you an overview of these two wonderful programs. General Isler and Larry?
Well, I'm back, and as I said earlier, we'd like to give you an overview of the CCEI, where we are, what the building's going to look like, how much it's going to cost, and so on. So Larry will go through a series of slides, and I'll end up with the financials and donor recognition slides. You can see where we are on funds that we've gotten to date. So, Larry?
Thank you, Rod, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me add my welcome to you and our appreciation from the Cyber Center for Education Innovation for your attendance here today. I think what I'd like to do, though, is to break the code and to give you a little bit of background. The Cyber Center for Education and Innovation, and it has the additional caveat, home of the National Cryptologic Museum. And for those of you who are familiar with those of us who have been at NSA for a long time, we try to turn everything into an acronym. But we haven't been able to do it on this one. But if you can think of one, we'd be glad to hear it. But the CCEI is a formally recognized via legislation from the Congress joint venture between the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation, the organization that I am part of, the organization that Mark Lepka is part of, the organization that General Isler is part of, and the National Security Agency. And the reason it has to be a formally legislated joint venture is that when we're all done with the fundraising, the building design, and everything else, and we have a facility that's ready to go, the foundation will gift that facility to the National Security Agency. But within the Department of Defense, if a private entity can only gift something of value up to $500,000. And as you'll hear in a little bit, this facility is going to cost a little bit more than that. So that's the aspect of it that helps to maybe align things. So the takeaway from this introduction is that this is very, very much a part of what you know as NSA, but it is a separate part, although we're highly joined in all the things that are important. And what we have come to start to call, and more importantly, what NSA has come to start to call, and I think Judy Emmel is still here, so Judy is NSA's liaison to the state and local government, is that we now refer to this as NSA's gateway to the public, this being the completed facility. If you could wave, Judy, and tell me I've interpreted that right, then we'll move on. So what is it that we're all about? This is our mission statement, and it deals with and touches on many of the issues that we have seen surfaced here this morning, both in this excellent keynote and certainly in the panel presentations. And what we recognize here is that out there at the intersection of Route 295 or in the Baltimore-Washington Parkway and Route 32, there's very, very much a nexus of the cyber and cybersecurity elements of both the United States government, but more importantly, and it has also been recognized, of industry that supports the government. If you take the right exit off of that intersection, you will be soon on National Business Parkway, which is about a 3-mile-long drive that has represented on either side of it in very, very nice buildings almost every major player in cybersecurity in the United States. So that's what we're all about. And what we're doing is taking an existing facility, the one that Rod referred to, that when General Oden looked out and saw the Colony 7 motel, he said, I don't want that motel owned by anybody but the United States government. You need to know a little bit about General Oden and his, he was, I think you call him one who studies the Soviet Union, who studied it, and he was very, very well versed in the kinds of things that the Soviets at that time, the Russians at this time, are capable of doing. So as Rod implied, NSA acquired this property by right of eminent domain. What became left of a very extensive motel complex was the place where you would check in, the reception area, the restaurant, the swimming pool, and the dinner theater. And that's the facility that currently houses today's National Cryptologic Museum, which if you haven't been there, I would highly recommend. The museum is open the normal business work days, Monday through Friday, and then every other Saturday, the first and third Saturdays, it's open to the public. There's no admission, the parking is free, and particularly for those, we had a couple of questions and requests, one from a student at Southern Maryland, and then the young lady who teaches over on the Eastern Shore in Worcester County. We encourage school groups, whether they be formal classroom groups or clubs, and if you're interested in doing that, sometime during the break, come and see me. I'll give you a card, and we will arrange for you to both have a tour, but more importantly, be able to participate for this very interactive experience for visitors there. Not too well known, within this greater region that we are in, Maryland, Northern Virginia, DC, there are about 130 museums and similar attractions ranked by TripAdvisor. And the National Cryptologic Museum is consistently ranked somewhere between 25th and 30 based on TripAdvisor reviews. The key selling point is the fact that if you come to the museum and ask for a docent tour, you will receive a tour from a docent who is a retired NSA employee who lived probably some portion of one story that's presented at the museum. So you're getting the facts right from a person who lives some portion of it, plus they've been well schooled in what the other stories are, and just as importantly, how much you can tell and how much you can't tell. So what our vision is the one that's shown here. And these are three words that you'll find throughout all of our literature. We believe we have a role, as described in the black print, to stimulate much of the discussion again this morning, certainly to educate, and the CCEI will be the vehicle for expanding the education from beyond just our nation's cryptologic history, and that's a rich history, to now, what does it mean to be a cyber citizen? And we do that with some very, very imaginative new exhibits that will be coming. But this symposium that we sponsor jointly with our education programming partner, UMUC, who has been most generous in their support of the CCEI and their leadership in many areas, is an example of even prior to the facility being available, we are trying to do this outreach. And then finally, there's a very, very important part of commemoration that has to do here, not only, as we'll talk about, with those who died in the service of their country while doing the cryptologic mission, but even for folks like me, Mark, and the many NSA alumni here. For 44 years, I served at the National Security Agency, and I would go home every night. At the latter part of those 44 years, our kids were gone, and my wife would say, now, she had the benefit of working there in the 70s, so there was a little bit of inside baseball that we could still talk about. But what do you say when all day long you've been looking at documents that say limited distribution, top secret, blah, 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 blah. So what we hope here, and what is done even today, is that someone may bring their family and say, I can't tell you what I'm doing today, but why don't you look at this good work that was done during the Korean War? Why don't you look at the Battle of Midway and see what a decisive role cryptology played in giving the U.S. combatant forces the particular edge that they needed to totally destroy the Japanese expeditionary fleet by surprise. So that's what we're about. And what I will show now in some of these slides are artist renderings of the new exhibit design. And for instance here, what you're looking at, many of you know that the key to breaking the German Enigma code as used by the German submarine forces was done through a device called the bombe, B-O-M-B-E, interesting derivation of how you get to that name. This is the Mona Lisa of our museum. This is the only remaining bombe. We thank a very diligent warrant officer who defied orders, did not destroy all the other 199 of them, but kept one up at Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, until it was unearthed and brought to NSA. If you looked at saw the movie Imagination Game, you might have a little bit different view of what the bomb did, how it came to be, but I will tell you this is the one here. What you're looking at also in the background is what we call the wall of cryptologic innovation. On that wall are a number of the things that we now can talk about where things were done either on the information assurance side of NSA's mission or the signals intelligence side that were really breakthroughs. But the key part of this one is that there are pull-out drawers where you can pull up a roll of punch paper tape that at one time was used to key certain cryptographic machines and things of that nature. Here's another one. We talked a little bit about how do you get through to folks. This is one of 4 interactive gaming places within the museum. This particular one will allow you to walk through, and as you change a password, it will show you the strength of that password and how many seconds it would take to break it by a brute force technique and by other techniques. It will also introduce in a very elementary way the important concept of hash functions and their role in authenticating passwords. So this is the kind of hands-on things that we will have that hopefully for both, we show here kind of, what do you say, maybe 20, 30 somethings here, but I will tell you that many of our exhibits and demonstrations are also geared to the middle school level. Here it looks like you'd have to give them a stool to stand up there to do that, but at any rate, we'll work on that. So education and innovation are the key words in our title. Here we're showing you in the education block 5 things that Mark Lepker has in his job jar. And if you want to pursue any of those, he'd be glad to talk to you about them. Our most exciting one, which I don't think I guess we talked a little bit about it generally, is we now have 2 robots, although one is kind of sick. His foot is broken. They are called Winston. Winston is named after a cat that I can tell you all about that has been very important to me. Friedman, of course, is named after the Friedmans, William and Elizabeth. And for those of you who like to delve into this kind of history, there's a great book out called The Woman Who Smashed Codes. It's about Elizabeth Friedman, but it tells you a whole lot about both the Friedmans and what they contributed. But it really is a must-reading and a very, very easy read in that regard. You notice I haven't said much about innovation, and to be frank with you, that's on next year's list. Right now, we'd be happy to just get our education program going, and we're very happy. And then the final feature is the commemoration feature. Here, we show on the left side a recreation of a wall that is currently within the main NSA headquarters complex, where the name of every cryptologist who has died doing his or her job, and there are unfortunately, not unfortunately, but realistically, recently especially, several women who have forward deployed in Afghanistan and Iran, who died as a result, most often as a result of being in vehicles that were subject to improvised explosive device explosions. So we have recreated this wall, and the difference is that now you don't have to be fully cleared, pass through the inspections to go into NSA to see this wall. You will come to a very special place in our facility where you can spend some time talking about with others about your loved one. So there are 176 there. Fortunately, there hasn't been a new name added in about a year, but there was a time at the height of Iraq that they were being added at almost a name a month. So that will give you some fun. And then if you're really into airborne stuff, we have National Vigilance Park. That is a park that formerly existed, had to be dismantled as NSA did some major road work. But in that park, you could have found an RU-8D, an Army plane that General Isler flew as a young lieutenant in Vietnam, where in order to direction find, he and his back-end operator would have to camp the wings and do all the things that aviators know how to do to get different lines of bearing on the signals. I'm sure he'd be glad to show you about that. But as he mentioned in his talk, General Isler thought we needed a more modern airplane, so we now have the Army's RC-12D that was first deployed during the Cold War to watch what was going on in East Germany, but as Rod indicated, has also flew counter-drug missions in Central America and is actually now flying in Afghanistan. So if you're into airplanes or your family's into airplanes, all of these will be available to look at, and we have some very ambitious plans for actually opening up the C-130 such that it can be regularly toured by somebody who comes to the site. All right, so in the little bit of time left here, just want to review what our facility is about. As you'll see when I talk about the floor plans, we're very big on providing the kinds of highly technically innovative conferencing spaces and places where people can gather. We will be very much refurbishing the museum and its artifacts and how they're displayed. Not too well known, but if you look carefully when Rod shows you our founders list, we list the name of Dr. David Kahn. So I will ask you here, and this will tell me how really into cryptology you are, how many of you have read Dr. Kahn's book, The Code Breakers? Okay, very good. That was kind of when many of us were growing up. That was the first thing we read. But Dr. Kahn has recently donated his entire research collection that he used in amassing what is still regarded as the definitive history of cryptology. Well, the rarest thing that we have that he has given us, many of you know that last year we celebrated the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther posting his 95 Thesis on the church wall, the door of the church at Wittenberg. That was also when the first book on cryptanalysis was written, and Dr. Kahn donated that book. And there are many other rare books, and so we have a rare book area. And then I've talked about the Memorial Park. This is where we are, intersection of Route 295 and the BW Parkway and Route 32. What you see highlighted in white is our 14-acre site. However, if your eyes are really good, you'll see a number 5 there. That's where the current museum is. So get to it, the same place. What you want to do is follow the signs very carefully to the National Cryptologic Museum and not to the NSA Visitor Center. Because if you do that, the latter, then you'll be delayed no more than 3 hours. So next two are simply the obligatory diagrams that show you that we have a 2-story facility, 74,000 square feet, Second floor is predominantly classroom and conference space. The classroom spaces have been designed by NSA's National Cryptologic School to meet all of NSA's requirements. One of the requirements NSA did levy on us, however, at NSA, as in many other government institutions, people who are promoted to what are considered the senior general ranks, GS ranks, are recognized. At NSA, this is done at least once a year, sometimes twice. These ceremonies are traditionally, family members are allowed to come, and that's a very, very big deal. I remember the first one when I was promoted to GS-13, I got to bring my wife, my 2 kids at that time, and everybody thought that was great. The problem, however, is to do that, you got to clear everybody into NSA, you got to escort them. So the one thing that NSA asked us is please make sure you have a space to hold 750 people. And so our main hallway, which as you can see is the dominant part of the architecture, is set up to permit assembly seating of up to 750. The last thing I would mention to you is the Hall of Honor. This fall on November 28th, we will induct 5 members into the NSA Hall of Honor. They will join 89 others, and this is where the true giants that brought us to where we are, on whose shoulders we continue to do good work, are recognized. And so, again, this Hall of Honor now is within the NSA main complex. We are providing it here, where you see all those pictures. These are the Hall of Honor honorees from previous years. If you look very carefully, it looks like it's the same picture on each of the 6 pillars. It is, because we didn't want to pay for doing the entire rendering, but you get the idea of what it's like. All right, so at this point, you probably have been around enough to know that you don't do this kind of stuff on good looks, which I don't have any, or charm. You do it by raising money. I'm a dumb engineer. I've never done sales. This is the hardest job I've ever had in my life. It takes persistence, but as Rod will report to you, we have been blessed. We're really on a roll, and our collection plate will be at the door as you leave.
Well, I don't have much time, so I'm going to go through these very quickly, and don't look real close, okay? I got 2 slides. First slide, let's go up with the capital campaign status. To date, we've raised $33 million. We're trying to get $53 million. And I don't know what happens here. Every time I brief this, that number goes up. Last time it was $40 million. Now we're up to 53. But that's okay. I'm in charge. I got to go out and find some more money. We'll work on it. But what happens here is we're spending, $6 million a year just to get to this point. We got to pay salaries. We got to pay room and board, that sort of thing. So anyway, $53 million. I will tell you the good news is this week, as I mentioned earlier, we had our founders meeting on Monday. We've picked up probably $1.5 million, maybe $2 million since Monday. Folks came in. In fact, our lead donor, Dr. Ed Schweitzer, handed a $500,000 check at the end of the presentation to Dick Schaefer. So that was not a bad deal. So next slide, please. Okay, here's the donors recap. I know you can't read all of that, but you can see we've broken this up at the star level. You'll see Ed Schweitzer at the top at $5 million. He started with 2 and he went to 3 and then he's up to 5. I think he's maxed out. I think he ran out of air, but he's doing well for us. The state of Maryland has been very good to us. We've been down with them several occasions, both O'Malley and Larry Hogan, and that's been a big supporter. I think I'm sorry, the slide is not up to date. They're up to $4 million now, so that's working out well. You can see David Kahn, we took all of his paperwork and stuff and books and things that he gave us and estimated that to be a $1 million donation. You can see who's on there. Booz Allen Hamilton is there at the $1 million. You can see the 250. You'll see Keith Alexander is in there. In fact, an interesting story, he gave 100,000, and then Chris Inglis gave 100,005. And then Chris said, well, that's not right. And so he went back, and they both were, I think they're up to 110 each, but I'm not real sure yet, but they're in there. So I think that's all I need to say on that slide. And that's it. So we'll get back on schedule. Anyway, we're on track. Thank you.
And the collection plates will be outside, so please feel free. 5s and 10s work. My next opportunity is to introduce Ben Herold. He's a staff writer for Education Week, covering education technology, and he also writes for the publication Digital Education Blog. He will briefly discuss the results of the Education Week Research Center and Consortium for School Networking Survey of the K through 12 school technology leaders and what Education Week is seeing as the state of cybersecurity education. Please welcome Ben Herold.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much to CCI for having me out, and thanks to you all for sharing your lunchtime with me. And if I could trouble in the back, I think we'll pull up the screen, and I'm going to talk off some of our recent coverage at Education Week of the K-12 cybersecurity landscape. And so what my goal here really is today is to give you kind of a quick overview of what we're seeing in K-12 schools across the country. I wanted to start doing that by introducing you to these two boys whose faces you see spinning towards you on the screens here. This is Jeremy Currier and Seth Stevens. They were recently expelled from their suburban Michigan school district. They hacked their district's network starting when they were 12. Initially, it started off pretty small. They wanted to bypass the school's internet filters so they could watch YouTube on their phones during lunch. Quickly escalated from there. They were in the school library, noticed on one of the public desktop computers in their middle school library, there was a sticky note. On the sticky note, there was a password and a username. They entered the password in the username and quickly discovered, being tech-savvy and curious young boys that they were, that if they logged in with those credentials and closed out of the book search software, they had access to all of the adult librarian staff's files. They opened the files, which were not password protected. Included in those files was an Excel spreadsheet with every student in the district's password in clear text. The boys decided that they wanted to keep exploring. And they were able to explore the district's network for 2 years undetected. By the time they were done, got caught, they had access to the passwords, logins, lunch balances, grades, locker combinations, personal contact information of all 15,000 of their classmates. They had access to the lesson plans, tests, answer keys, and email messages of all of the teachers in the Rochester Community Schools District. They owned the district's security cameras. They were able to log in from home and pan, zoom, rewind the internet-enabled security cameras in all of the schools in their district. They could remotely operate all of the desktop computers in the school district via their phones. They were even using the district servers to mine for cryptocurrency. So we told Seth and Jeremy's story and why I wanted to share it with you here today, because we think it highlights two important realities about the cybersecurity landscape in K-12 right now. The first is the reason that we're all here today. There is a lot of pressure on schools to prepare young people to be the cybersecurity workers of tomorrow, to fill this skilled labor gap that our speakers have already talked in detail about. Ostensibly, young people like Jeremy and Seth should be the low-hanging fruit to do that. They have the talent, the inclination, the mindset to do that. But the thing that's also happening in K-12 is that not only are schools really struggling to tap into those talents and curiosity, they're struggling just to secure their own networks. And so I want to start by, I'm going to provide you a little more detail about the second truth first. So over the past 2 years or so, there's been, the K-12 sector in general has been subject to a barrage of cyber attacks. Many have been from students and insiders. There's been a lot of students hacking their systems to change grades, taking control of their school's Twitter accounts, sending out inappropriate content, et cetera. The K-12 sector has also been victimized by a spate of W-2 phishing schemes. Districts have lost millions of dollars in fraudulent tax returns and diverted wages and construction funds and so forth, all the result of W-2 phishing schemes. And then there's this gentleman. This is Steve Bradshaw. He is the superintendent of the Columbia Falls, Montana School District. Last year when I talked to Mr. Bradshaw, he told me that he had to start sleeping with his shotgun. His district in Montana was victim of a ransomware attack, apparently by an overseas hacker group known as Dark Overlord. Not only were the hackers threatening to release sensitive personal, medical, behavioral information on specific students and families in the district's files, they also had control of his district security cameras and were calling him and telling him where he was and that they were watching him. So despite all of these threats, despite all of these headlines, despite all of these realities, though, there does not seem to be a lot of alarm, a recognition of the threat among K-12 security technology leaders. So one of the things we did last year was we partnered with the Consortium for School Networking, which is the professional association of school technology leaders, and we surveyed about 400 tech leaders from the K-12 sector around the country. And one of the things we asked is, to what extent do you see these various cyber threats as actual threats that you're facing? And we were actually surprised, and I think the field was dismayed to learn that less than half of K-12 security leaders thought phishing scams were a significant or very significant threat. Only about a third thought ransomware attacks were a significant or very significant threat. Only about 18% thought DDoS attacks were a potential threat, significant threat. It seemed that there was some compelling evidence here that there was a significant underestimation of the problems that K-12 is facing kind of on its own IT structure. And with that, even more concerning was the responses that we heard the school technology leaders saying that they were or were not taking. We asked about a number of different steps and measures that I think many of you would probably recommend that school IT leaders take. We found that less than half of school IT leaders said they were monitoring their networks in real time for intrusions. Only about 18% said that they were, only about 15% said they had implemented a comprehensive cybersecurity plan in their district. And the one that many in the field, in reaction to the story, found most alarming and concerning is that just over 10% of school district technology leaders said they were taking a basic step, such as requiring two-factor authentication for district accounts. So this presented a portrait for us, and I think for the field, that was not at all encouraging. We're going to be updating these findings early in 2019. Hopefully there will be some improvement. But this reality, again, K-12 being in a place where right now really struggling to protect its own networks, while at the same time being expected to prepare students to deal with the larger threats in the world. And that's creating a real tension. So one of the other things that we did last year at Education Week was we tried to survey the landscape around K-12 cybersecurity education, the work that many of you all are doing and that we're here to talk about today. And what we found was a lot of attention and effort and focus in many respects. 8 different federal agencies, any number of states, the National Governors Association, private and nonprofit businesses and groups really trying to put out curriculum, push opportunities, run programs, engage schools in all manner of ways. But in many respects, running into a lot of barriers. Certainly there's a lot of great work being done, and we've heard about some of that already today, and we'll hear about more this afternoon. But I think what we saw what we see at Education Week when we talk to schools around the country is that there are some consistent obstacles that many of these groups and programs and efforts run into in trying to bring this work to scale. Schools are operating on very tight budgets right now. They have very tight schedules. It's hard to bring new material into the school day. It's a challenge to get curricula that can be relevant, keep up with the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. Even if you do have curricula, it's hard to train teachers to keep up with the curricula. And there's also this lingering tension within the field about the extent to which cybersecurity education should focus on national security issues, bring that lens to the work. To what extent should it focus on workforce development, bring that lens to the work. To what extent should it really be considered a basic foundational skill for citizenship and academic development, regardless of whether it's the foundation for a field in cybersecurity or computer science or STEM, or perhaps for humanities and liberal arts majors as well. All of those tensions are happening on the ground, and I expect that many of you are experiencing them and running into them yourselves. And for us, that brings me back to Jeremy and Seth and what really stood out to me with their story. Because I think what we would hope is that we would have a system, an education system that had the capacity and the resources and the will and the talent to identify those interests and aptitudes in young people early, to cultivate them, to nurture them, and to help them grow. And I think what we're seeing right now is the reality is that the system is not there yet, and there's a lot of work to be done. And so I appreciate the chance to share our work with you, and even more so, I appreciate the chance to learn this afternoon about the work you're all doing to address that challenge. Thanks so much.